ఏంటో ఎత్తాడు డ్రైవర్. కట్ చేశారు మీరు. Okay, am I audible over here? Yeah. Okay. Any doubts on application monitoring or log monitoring? చేస్తే కదా వచ్చాయి. You'll get doubts when you do it. If you don't do it, there is no problem. Okay. So today what we are going to look at is we are going to look at system monitoring. Okay. Okay. Fine. In the last class, we have seen log monitorings. Log monitorings will tell how the applications behave because you are reading the application logs, right? Yeah. And basically, they might tell you certain extra details like when you use some beat components like metric beats, packet beat, and all of that, they might give you some additional information. But Elasticstack is majorly towards monitoring logs. Okay. But let us assume you have 50 servers and one server goes down. One server goes down for some reason. Okay. So this is basically you need to be informed. There needs to be some tool which informs this to some of your admin group. Yeah. Elasticstack can do this, but Elasticstack is not made for this. There are two different things. Always remember. So EC2 machine creation. Why do I need to use Terraform? Can't I use Ansible? Yes, you can use Ansible, but Ansible was never made for creating infrastructure. Because of its design, it is possible. And కొన్ని కుదురుతాయి అంతే. But the tool was not intentionally made for this. Okay. So Elasticstack, whatever we are looking at, is basically designed to read logs, whereas the tool which we are going to learn right now is basically towards system monitoring. What is happening with your system? Is your system running? Is it failing? If it is failing, how do I report it to others? So all of the system monitoring is basically all about monitoring system aspects. Here we'll never bring the application aspects, always the system aspects. That could be like, okay, reachability. Reachability is whether the machine is reachable or not. Okay. Disk and RAM utilizations. Okay. And what are the other things which are reachable? Network reachability, yeah. And device configurations. When I say device, using these tools, let us assume that you are within a network and your router goes down. The problem is not with system, the problem is with router, right? So you can bring in all of this by adding even devices. Okay. So for example, in this room, the network is not working out. All the systems reachability will be down and router is also down. So what could be the root cause? Router could be the root cause. So you can basically build relations like this. You can design your network, and basically when some of the devices, let us assume that 10 or 20 systems are going down, and there is one device that goes down. So actually the reason might not be the system, the reason might be the device. So you can create these sort of relations. So this kind of tools are basically made for this, right? So it is all about reachability not working, disk utilization going away, all of the system aspects. And there are many tools to do this, many tools to do this. But the tools which we are going to decide, which we are going to discuss, is Nagios. But you have alternatives to this. For example, there is something called as Zabbix, and the Nagios opens open source team itself has came up with new monitoring tool. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of it, but in that, pardon me, yeah. So basically, the design, the core part is exactly the same, but when it comes to the way the architecture after that, it has heavily improved in that. But still, Nagios is a giant there, right? So still, till that other tools become more, what do you say, more customer friendly, we have to deal with Nagios itself, because first thing is Nagios comes up with two versions. One is free, the other one is the enterprise, and our classroom is all towards the open source stuff, not towards the enterprise version of it, right? So we will tend to avoid all the enterprise versions throughout this journey. The only enterprise version which we will be looking at is Chef. Chef is the only tool where we look at enterprise versions, not the open source versions. But apart from that, every other tool we are more focused towards free stuff itself, right? Even in Chef, we learn the basics. Basics is not enterprise, but when we apply it, we use the enterprise server, or then there are tools like Terraform where you can apply Chef, which is free, right? So basically, Nagios, there are two versions. One is the free version, which they call it as Nagios Core, and then they have something called as Enterprise, which they call it as Nagios Enterprise. So our responsibility using Nagios is the use case which I want to achieve is, okay, monitor reachability. That's it. Okay, this is the first aspect, and the next aspect is how can I do custom monitoring. So if it is not the above mentioned functionalities, and if it is something else, then how do I do custom monitoring? Okay, so this is the core focus of our journey. One is which is already available. If it is not there, what has to be done? I'll not be doing that, but because that assumes some of the programming stuff from there. But at least we'll understand how to do it if we have to. Okay, fine. So yeah, any system aspect can be measured. Yes. So this is our first stuff. And now whatever I've decided written over here till this point, it is no different in any monitoring tool. Apart from the name which I've written as Nagios, Zabbix, you use anything, this has to be there. Okay. Now, if I come to Nagios specifics, there are certain terminologies which you need to understand. If I come to Nagios specific, there are certain terminologies which I need to understand. So let us see what are they. Okay. These are the major terminologies for us to understand the Nagios. You need to understand what a host is, what a host group is. Okay. Group combination is very simple. Combination of whatever you are seeing is called as a group. So for example, you have contact group, which means basically the combination of groups. Service group, I'm not sure. Let me cross check. Okay. So host group, command, service, and then contact and contact group. These are the basic building blocks of Nagios. If you understand this, I think you should be able to use the basic services. All right. Okay. And then there is one more stuff which is called as active or passive clients. Okay. Nagios interview cannot go beyond any of these topics. They might ask you to write a file. That's a different story. But technically, all of the Nagios interviews will be underneath this stuff. Okay. So what is that? Why are these things important and what do they mean? Okay. So as usual, Let us draw some architecture. I'm not describing whether they are web servers, app servers. I'm not interested in all of that. But let us draw, all of these are some systems in our production environment, right? So we have some established networking between them, right? So some 4 systems, each system has its own purpose, all right? So, and then we would obviously have one system with an Nagios or whatever monitoring tool it is. That's the basic stuff, right? You have your machines, and then you have Nagios. I've drawn 4. It could be 400 also, right? So for Nagios, every system which you are seeing over there, or every device which you are seeing over there, okay, is host. For Nagios, every system which you want to monitor is a host, okay. And when you install Nagios, basically there will be only one host, that is local host. So Nagios will be monitoring itself, and then we need to change configuration so that we add our hosts, okay. So in your company, if there are many devices, then we need to add hosts, right? And the other thing is, since it is very difficult for us to add all the hosts at one shot, okay, what we do is we create something called as a host group, okay. Host group could be as simple as web servers, okay, mail servers, ftp servers, or whatever it is. They do similar stuff, okay. So that is a host group. We create hosts, and then logically we group that host into based out of their behaviors, okay. Or we can create groups like Linux servers, Windows servers, right? You can have any category that makes sense to you. Adding a host is very simple. I can give you either an IP address or a host name, whatever that your machine can reach. From this machine to that machine, if they want to reach out on anything, then we would be basically using host or host groups, right? Fine. Now, whenever these machines fail, whenever these machines fail, you need to basically speak with certain people. Yes, certain people needs to be informed, right? So each person for that for Nagios is contact. And when you group all of them, like admins, managers, testers, developers, when you group them, we call it as simple. So 4 terminologies, are we clear? Every machine becomes a host, and when we group that machines, we call them as a host group. Similarly, every person whom you want to communicate will become a contact, and when you group them, they become a contact group. All right? Okay. Now, basically, we have something called as command now. Okay. So, what is this command? Command is the actual command that executes your monitoring. Command is the actual Nagios command that does whatever it has to. For example, you say that this machine is not reachable. How will you tell that that machine is not reachable? Probably you might ping the machine. So when we ping the machine, we might not get the response. So then we will be able to make out that it is not reachable. So the actual stuff which performs this, okay, is called as a command. So you will have commands like check ping, check disk usage, check RAM, or whatever it is. So basically the basic utility is we will have commands. Command is the raw stuff that executes in Nagios on different machines. Okay. Or server speaks with that machines using those commands. Okay. So command is the actual worker over here. Rest of the things are organizers. Okay. So to the command, you will pass a host or a host group, and it will find out which are working and which are not working. If you are which are reachable or not reachable when we speak of ping command. When we speak of disk usage command, it will give the metric saying that the disk usage or the free disk space that is left is 1% or 10% or 1 GB or 10 GB, whatever, based out of whatever command which you configure. So command is the actual worker. Command is the actual worker. And now In the service, what would happen is, let us assume that you're basically creating monitoring for a database server, right? So whenever you create a command for a database server, you will have same commands on multiple database servers. Yes or no? So for example, on MySQL, if I want to do monitoring, so my monitoring will not change from one MySQL to other MySQL. Probably I might be using the same monitoring steps. So for that, I would be creating something called a service in there, in which I will be adding multiple command checks, right? So I might use the check ping there. I might use check disk usage there. I might use the other stuff, whatever is possible. So that I will group by service. So command is the actual raw command line utility that basically does the monitoring. Okay. Rest of all are organizational stuffs. Rest of all are for easily managing the stuff, managing the entries. But the actual stuff which does the work is command. Okay. And when I said that whenever you want to do something differently which is not present in Nagios, what do you want is command. You should be able to write your own command, or there are many third-party commands which are basically there for purchase or basically open source. You can use them. Okay. So any check which you want to do using Nagios is a command. Are we good? So we'll have a command which is a raw utility, service, and all the other things are logical organizations. Okay. Panjese command matrame, because that is the actual Linux statement or command line utility which will tell what is happening. So for example, there is a command called as check ping, and to that, if you pass arguments, it would try to tell that whether the ping is successful or not, and what are the different statistics which it has received. For example, you do check disk usage. Check disk usage is a command to which you will pass multiple inputs to it, and it would give you an output saying that okay, disk usage is this much. Okay. So in Nagios, basically these are all the building blocks, right? And then I have said two different things, active or passive, right? So let us see what that is. Then I'll come back on all of this. If you have any questions, you can ask me at that point. Active versus, let me go to the Nagios documentation itself. Okay. So basically, by default, all the checks in Nagios are active. What would happen is Nagios server will basically take different arguments and then execute those commands. But sometimes your system might be in a network which is not accessible to Nagios server, right? Or the monitoring detail which you want to perform is not basically from server, it is something from client. Okay, something on the other machine which you want to execute. Then how Nagios works is Nagios basically will try to execute that command in a periodic interval. So for example, you say that for every 20 seconds, I want to do ping. So it is an active check. Server basically checks the ping every time, right? So server is collecting the details. Passive check is a concept where client sends the statistics to the server. Server does not do it, but client sends the statistics. So for example, client will do check on its own, and then it would say that these are my results. Okay, and I'm sending these results to you. So this is a passive check. This is against how Nagios normally works. This is against how Nagios normally works. So that's why you are seeing something like external application, external command file going into the Nagios process and then getting the results. Okay, it is not the Nagios process, it is the other way around. Okay, Nagios will be informed in this case. In all the other cases, Nagios will collect the information, but in the case of passive checks, basically it will be informed with the basic stuff. Okay, so whenever they say active client or passive client, again the same meaning. Whatever is the active check or a passive check, exactly the same meaning. Passive clients are basically Nagios clients on which monitoring is being executed by that client itself, and then it will upload the results to Nagios. Okay, for this there are some plugins which you can install, NRPE and all of that kind of a plugins. For active checks, there is no need of any plugins because it would log into your system via the basic Linux or Windows command line utilities. But If it is active check, it works as an agent process. So on the client, there will be something running that speaks with Nagios. In that case, you need to pass the URL of the Nagios and if required some credentials. Right? So Nagios primarily is from Nagios server to other servers. Communication happens in that direction. Only in the case of passive, the direction happens other way around. So active versus passive, right? So basically, if I have to draw the direction, okay, generally the direction is this. Nagios server will be basically executing this monitoring or will be in control of this monitoring. But in the case of passive, what would happen is, let us assume that this server is something special. Okay. Now the monitoring details from here, okay, let me use a different color so that it is simple. Okay, will be sent to the Nagios server. And in this case, the direction is, then that server is going to behave as if it is a passive client. And the check which does, or the command which is executed, is called as passive command or a passive check, right? So active is when server is collecting and passive is when your client is sending. Philosophically, that is the difference. If you go one level deeper, you will find many more other ways of looking at it. But this is a basic difference between active and passive. Active is Nagios monitor, Nagios server monitoring the details or collecting the details. Passive is exactly the other way around. Okay, Nagios is informed about the statistics. Okay, this passive checks are configured in the cases of network reachability issues. Your production servers should not be connected to any of your local kind of stuff. So then, how do you communicate your monitoring details? We use passive checks. If that is yes, that is a scenario. Okay, so are these concepts good? Host group, okay, contact group, command, service, okay, active and passive, right? So these are the main building blocks of Nagios. Whenever you speak of Nagios, whenever you're writing files in Nagios, you need to understand all of this. Okay, so when you add a new server, what has to be added? Host. When you want to add a new person, when you want to do a new check, command. Okay, and if that check is basically applicable to certain groups, then you might be adding it to some services. That's how it is, right? So then whenever you are doing a check on a service on a client, you should be able to make out whether it can be active or whether it has to be passive. If it is passive, you need some installations. Passive will not work directly. You need some external application even in that stuff. So if it is already existing passive check, then you might have Nagios plugins itself. Otherwise, you have to write your own application to basically achieve that. This is what a Nagios architecture is, right? So whatever we have discussed is discussed about the basic building blocks of Nagios and typically how Nagios works, and this describes your architecture, right? Okay. So any doubts on this till now? Okay. So what has to be done? Are we clear? How it has to be done? Let us learn later. Let us learn later. But adding a new person, adding a new check, right? Grouping. For example, I have 10 database servers. So probably I might create a host group and also a service. And this service might call multiple different commands at one shot, right? So when to group and what has to be grouped. These are the basic stuff, and it is not technical, by the way. Then ఇప్పటివరకు మాట్లాడింది పెద్ద technical కూడా కాదు. These are basic terminologies, right? Fine. Now let me do one thing. Okay. Now one more thing is basically Nagios installation. Nagios installation was quite simple till Nagios 3. Okay, because we have Nagios 3, sorry, because we had package manager based. So when I say package manager based, you will be getting some like apt-get or yum command where you can install this. But now Nagios is not providing packages. What you have to do is you have to download code Okay, and build the code. Okay, and from this you have to execute the installation. That is what Nagios is now. So whenever you want to use Nagios 4, you would go with this mode. Okay, and for this to be done, it uses a compiler which is GCC. Okay, in most of the Linux distributions, the GCC will already be there. But apart from that, we need some additional tools, right? Nagios heavily uses Perl. Internally, it uses Perl a lot. Okay, but the core is written in C or CPP, but it uses Perl for a lot of its configuration, and you would have some Perl based or Perl looking like Perl kind of configurations. Okay, so whenever you want to write your own commands, you should be good at Perl. You should be good at Perl. But for using Nagios, you don't need any basic stuff. You need to understand this, the concept which we have discussed till now. All right. So shall we try this installation? Yeah. Okay. I'll start with Nagios 3. This is quite a simple installation. Nagios 3 will not trouble you a lot, but Nagios 4 will. Okay. So that's it. I have to get install -y Nagios 3. Okay. Fine. So let us install this and then let us go to the Nagios 4. Nagios 4 is quite engaging. You have to download the code and you have to do all the build actions and all of that. But let us start with something simple so that even if Nagios 4 fails, we can still work on Nagios 3. We have some sort of, there are many companies who still use Nagios 3. Okay. So I'll take, yeah, T2 micro should be enough. Okay. 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 I'm just logging in into this machine. Yeah. Let us see whether it is Nagios, right? First is spelling is wrong. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So give some password over here. Okay, now let us go to the public IP address of this machine. Okay, so http colon slash slash, this is the basic, it will install Apache. Okay, how can I miss? Yeah, Nagios 3 slash Nagios 3, whatever is the public IP address of this machine. The username is Nagios admin, that is fixed, and the password is whatever password which you have set while your installation. If everything is configured correctly, you should see a web page. That's it. This is your Nagios landing page, and then you need to work with configuration files so that you go over here. Okay, and you configure your host groups. As of now, I'm not seeing anything because the only, as I said, by default it adds localhost, and if you see, it is having just localhost. Okay, and then when you get into any localhost, select on any host for that matter. Come on, yeah, that is a service, and the individual thing basically is a basic command that is executed. So as of now, it was able to best just check current load, but as the time progresses, it will give the details of all the other commands. All right, so this is a very simple installation, right? So for the people whom Nagios 4 fails, don't worry about doing all of this. ఇదైతే అందరూ చేయగలరుగా. So Nagios 4 might fail because of various different reasons, because you have to follow the order. If you miss out at one point, you are building the code and then you are doing the stuff, so it might fail. And I'm really not worried about installation because you don't go to office and start installing Nagios 4. You will work on configuration files, remember that. Okay, so don't worry too much on installations, worry more on configurations, right? So when you wait for some more time, you would be able to see what is the basic stuff. Localhost up. Okay, and now it says that what is available on this machine, and then you can do some of the activities over here, right? But the Nagios open source is not that UI friendly. Most of the things you have to do from configuration, all right? But if you go to the Nagios enterprise, this page will become more functional, all right? And it would have many default command support. For example, in Nagios open source, the commands which you get by default are less when compared to what you get in enterprise. In enterprise, we get more by default. Okay, which means that you can do lots of different kinds of monitoring. Okay, is it not possible in open source? It is definitely possible, but you need to write your own commands, or you need to download the commands from some external third parties or whatever it is, right? So these are the different kinds of things which are different, but this is quite simple installation, right? I don't think so anyone has a problem in installing. You have to just create a Ubuntu machine and then execute a couple of commands: apt-get update and apt-get install Nagios minus Nagios 3 minus y. Okay, and then at one point it would ask what is the password which you want to set. Please do that, and once you set that password, okay, just go to your server URL, http colon whatever your server's IP address is slash Nagios 3. The default username in the case of Nagios is Nagios admin, and to that set the password whatever you have. Simple. This is Nagios 3 is very simple installation. But this app to get install Nagios whatever was there from 4, Nagios has decided that it is not going to maintain any packages. 4 నుండి అదేం డిసైడ్ చేసిందంటే నేను యాప్ టు ఎమ్ ఏమి ఇవ్వను. I will not be giving any kind of package manager support for this. So what we have to do is we have to go it in a very raw or a crude way, right? So let us do those steps right now. Fine. So for your practice, even if you are doing on this, it's absolutely fine. Okay, there are many companies who are still on Nagios 3. Okay, because generally people don't tend to change monitoring tools because it is a hell lot of work, and if it is working great, ఇంకో 5-6 ఏళ్ళు కూడా ఇదే వాడచ్చు, because for them whatever checks they are doing, this if Nagios 3 is able to tell them saying that whenever some server goes down, it is sending mails, why do I want to change the version? Anyway it is free, whatever I'm going to install is also free. Okay, so yeah, it is good that you are always on a latest version, but there is always a difference between ideality and reality, right? So some companies don't tend to move very fast. Okay, so now if it is about Nagios 4, Since I have to do the compilation activity, I'll be taking a bit huge machine. Okay, that is only to speed up the process, but you can work out on T2 micro also. All right, I'll not be taking a very huge machine, but I'll be taking 4 gigs of RAM. That's it, so that my compilation is faster rather than having on a 1 GB RAM. Okay, if you use it on a T2 micro, it might take more time. That's it. This I would call it as Nagios 4. Same security group. I'll basically be selecting a security group which opens all the ports. Launch. Fine. Yes, Nagios is open source. Okay. Now Nagios for installation. So you have DigitalOcean's documentations. You can either follow this. Okay. So this is a documentation where he will try to tell you what is that you are trying to do. Each and every step you can basically follow from here, right? Okay, or you can go to the Nagios site and there will be instructions. So anything is fine. Okay, fine. Let me follow this. Okay, so if you read through this documentation, he will try to tell you that first thing which you need to do is initial server setup with Nagios. For you have to read this. All right. So he will try to tell you a very basic stuff. Do you have root privileges? Do you generate key value pair and all of that? For us to be very specific, we don't need all of this, because whenever we create a machine in AWS, these are all done. So the first step is not required. And now this is required. We need to install Apache server. So these steps we need to do it. Okay. So we will start from here. If you read the documentation, you would say that a LAMP stack is required. So that's why we are installing the LAMP stack on this machine. And for that, we have gone through this documentation and we'll be following this documentation till end, till the end. Right? Okay. And if you don't like DigitalOcean, you can try any other installation. It's not where you install from, it is what are the steps which you are following. You can go to the Nagios website itself, and then there are also installation instructions from here. You choose whatever you want. All right. Okay. Now let me get into this machine. Oh, let me exit out of this machine. First step, always the same. Update your packages first. And then get into this documentation and follow whatever you are seeing over here. Okay. I'm installing the Apache web server. All right. And then to check it, he's trying to tell that use HTTP colon server address. I'm quite sure that it would work. I'm really not worried about this step. Okay. So if you want to find the server's IP address, you can do all of this. I'm really don't want to do all of this. I'm interested in MySQL installation. So okay. Okay, and then let us scroll down. If you want to secure your installation, then you will be doing this. For me, it is okay. Even if someone hacks my SQL, I don't have anything in my SQL for me to really worry about. So I'm not really interested in. And then we are installing PHP. So I'm just adding -y to whatever installation is because I don't want to enter whether it is yes or no or whatever it is. Okay. So then he asked me for directory configuration. This I'm okay with it. Index.php. If you want to modify, you can add this. Okay. And then he's asking me to install some PHP additional modules. Okay. So if you want any additional modules, you can do it. But he's asking me to install only this. So I'm okay with this. Okay. Even I don't need this also, by the way. Fine. It is already installed because of some dependencies. But if you want some additional PHP modules, you will be doing this. Good. And then test the processing. I am not going to do this because my main name is not PHP, whether it is working or not. My main name is Nagios. So I'm okay with this. So I am ready for till here. So whatever Nagios is required, I already have in this machine. Then I would start the actual Nagios stuff. Right. So then he's asking me to create Nagios user and then Nagios group. All right. So let me do this. First, I'm creating the user called as Nagios. Okay. And then a group called as Nagios CMD. You can change these names if you don't want Nagios or Nagios CMD. You can basically change these names. Okay. And then you are adding a user to the group. Okay. And then he's asking us to update the packages. Not required, but yeah, it's okay. Because this is given with the intention that you have not updated for a while. Now, we are going to install, download the code and build, right? And for building the code, we might need some utilities. And this list is all about that. This list is all about those utilities, right? So just copy this list, paste it, and use -y. If you don't have that build utilities, your Nagios might not work out because Nagios has to build the code. Yeah. Okay. Then he's asking us to download some Nagios based stuff. Let us see whether this is a valid link or not. Sometimes, right, these links might not be valid because there might be a new version and all of that. Yeah, the download is starting, so I'm okay with it. Just check till this point. If the download starts, the link is good. Now I'll do, or you can use whatever command that they have written over here, the curl command. Both do exactly the same. Okay. And now he's asking us to move to the home directory. And if I'm not wrong, I'm already in the home directory. So that's why I'm not done cd home. All right. Now, basically, let us try to extract this file because the file which we got is a zip in the tar format. Okay. And to extract this, you'll be using tar command, tar xvf. All right. Oh, sorry. So we are seeing a folder called as Nagios -4-1.1, whatever it is. All right. So let us get into that folder. Cd. From here, the commands will start. Okay. The commands will start. Now, what he tries to tell is, if you want, if you have any mail exe that is configured, for example, from Linux, while you are sending mails, there are multiple ways of sending mail. You can use send mail, you can use mail exe, and there are many other exes or executables which can basically help you in sending mail. If you want Nagios to send a mail via some specific stuff, you can use that. So you can use that, you can add that command to whatever steps which you are adding at the bottom right now. So for now I'm not interested really in that part, so I'll be executing whatever is default. So I'm trying to tell that I want to configure the Nagios with the group and with the command group. All right, so okay, so he says that once you finish your Nagios all of the stuff, in the earlier case we have used slash Nagios 3, but in the case of Nagios 4 it is not slash Nagios 4, it is slash Nagios. That's the only thing, right? Now compile all of the Nagios by using a command which is called as make all. Make all is a compilation command for C or CPP code, or by using make files. So make all. If this make fails, we can't do anything. That's the problem with Nagios 4, because you are compiling the code, and then if the code fails, there could be multiple reasons. Nagios code will generally, whatever you're downloading is always stable. You might have missed some prerequisite. You have to again start from beginning. What is the prerequisite which I have missed? You have to go through the documentation and ensure that everything is good. All of that. Okay. But when you do apt-get update, apt-get install Nagios, you need not worry about all of this. Right. I'll do one thing. Installation followed. Okay. Fine. Everything looks good. Now, after this, he asks us to use sudo make install. You have to execute all of them, right? So, sudo make install. That's my first command after this. Good. And then he's asking us to execute sudo. Even in the documentation over here, you can see you have to execute these 3 commands. But let us follow this, because it is easy to copy paste from here, right? Okay. Good. Done. Okay. Config files are installed. And then he's asking us to do Nagios configuration. Okay. Into Apache sites available configuration. Yeah. Even if you don't know what this command is, blindly follow this. There is no other option. Done. Now, basically, whenever you want to use the external commands, then we need to basically add one more stuff. Okay, which is a web server user. We are adding it to our Nagios group again. Because why? Why is this step required? Because our website Nagios is hosted on Apache web server, and for Apache web server, the basic user is www-data. To him, we are giving the Nagios CMD access so that he can execute some of the Nagios commands. All right. Okay. This is good. And now we have to install the Nagios plugins now. All right. So go back to your home directory. Okay. Always the first check is just see whether this link is working or not. DigitalOcean generally keeps its documents up to date, but whenever you are copying from some other locations, right? If these links are not working, you might be in trouble. Yeah. Download is starting, you are good. Yeah. So I'll go to the home directory and then I'll execute this command. Again, tar what is it? Nagios hyphen Oh, or oh, XVF. Okay. Now we have two folders. One is Nagios, the other one is Nagios plugins. Now you will get into this plugins folder and you would do whatever you have done in the last place. So almost the same stuff. All right. So CD Nagios plugins. Good. And now once you are within this folder, and again copy this. Okay. So now you have to execute make and sudo make install. Okay. And then sudo make install. Good. NRP, it's okay. I'm not really looking out for NRP. Okay. NRP is an additional step. If you want, you can do it, but even without that, it should be okay. All right. So now configuring Nagios. There is a configuration file over there, and then basically you can configure all of your Nagios from here. All right. And then you basically configure your Nagios commands, all of this. This is how we work on Nagios. All right. But before we do all of this, okay, let us basically do these two steps so that we can access Nagios first and then we can configure it later. All right. So sudo service Nagios restart. What does it say? Yeah, that's fine. Good. So what is the IP address of this machine? Nagios 4. Copy your IP address. http:// This will get you a web page and slash Nagios. No, it will not have 4. This means it is not properly configured. So if you see the link over here, you'll get these failures, man. The problem with this failure is, unfortunately, you have to go and basically look at all of the stuffs. And one thing which I want to basically look is, did I change the password for Nagios 4? Yes. ఇవి చేయాలండి. Configure Apache is required. I've not done this. Okay. It's okay. Now, okay. Okay. Now you change the password for your Nagios admin. We have not set it, if you see in the steps till now. So give some password that makes sense to you. Okay. We have not done all of this and we have just restarted, right? So that's why you are. Okay, and then the steps. Okay, and then if you want to run Nagios, basically whenever you start your machine, you can do this. Good. Okay. Now let us see if there is any luck. Yeah. Nagios admin and whatever password which you have set. Good. So it is trying to tell that you have installed 4.1.1. Now I have 4.3.4. If you want, you can move to there. We will not be doing that because it is easy to follow one documentation rather than trying multiple documentation. Right? So on both 3 and 4, we are at the same step now. Okay. Now we would be writing some of the configuration files. Right? So let us basically get to that area. And see that configuration files, and actual configuration files we'll be writing it tomorrow based out of some architecture. Right? So now there is no need for you to really look out the stuffs. Yeah, fine. So let us get into some of the existing folder structures. If you want to know the folder structures, this is where you will have Nagios configurations. So cd, are you seeing nagios.cfg? Yes. This will contain the basic Nagios configurations. I'm not going to change anything now, right? But whenever you want to change any of the stuffs at the Nagios system level, this is a file that will help you. This is the file that will help you. And if you come over here, okay, so there if you are seeing, you are seeing files like cfg file is equal to user nagios, user local nagios etc objects and commands.cfg. So the basic nagios commands are configured at that location and contacts are configured at that location. So shall we get into this folder? So if you want to know where the basic files are, if you find the Nagios CFG file in any installation of Nagios, you will be able to make out where the other files are. So cd, okay. Now let me get into vi commands.cfg. Okay. Now if you see, you are seeing commands like notify host by email, notify service by email, check host alive. Okay. So this command will basically check whether the host is alive or not. Okay. And similarly service check commands. So all the commands which we are going to use are basically configured over here, and these are all the commands which Nagios has given us. Tomorrow even if you write a command, you can basically go over here and define a command. And are you seeing that command line option? Okay, this command line option will tell what has to be executed. So for example, process service perf data will do something which looks like this. So every command will have some command line which will tell what has to be done. Okay, and here we will have some Nagios specific syntaxes or Nagios specific the stuff. Okay, so for example, there is command called as check ping. All right, so in the check ping command, basically you will be executing the check ping and you will be passing the host addresses, and then you would have something called as argument 1 and argument 2. We will find out what these things are, but actually you will define a command, and command will have a command line which will be executed whenever the command has to be executed. And then you will, for every command you might have certain arguments which Nagios will pass. Okay, how are these configured? We'll look at that point later. So command will have what now? A name and command line. Command line is the actual step that happens. Now let us see at the other files. Are you seeing something called as localhost? Okay, let me go over here. So in localhost definition, he has defined a host. Okay, and then he's calling the host name as something. okay, which is basically the name address. So if I want to add one more server, what will I do? Define host, okay, use some name, Linux server, whatever you are seeing over here, and then I'll come to host name and give the actual host name of the machine which I want to address now, and then address of that machine. That's it. That's the step which you need to add. Okay, so now host group, you will create a group, and in the group you have section called as members, and in the members you will add different members. This is all logical, this is not at all technical. You can basically look at these files and make out what these guys do. And then service. Now if you see in the service, a command is used, and remember a command takes arguments, yes or no? Command line the all argument 1 and argument 2, did we see in that? Now we see what service is doing. Service is calling a command and it is passing some arguments. Okay, so even though we call it as a service, service is actually a command, a command where the command line arguments are passed. So we'll be defining these services, right? And now in the service, if you see, there is something called as a host name, okay, which defines that whatever service which you have defined over here should be running on whatever host which is present over here. If you want to run this on multiple machines, rather than using a host, you will be using a host group's name. So for example, I want to use check ping on 10 servers. For 10 servers, I have a host group name called as my 10 servers. So rather than using a host name, I'll be using something called as a host group name, and I will be passing basically the group's name over here. So this service, whatever you have configured, will run on the host group names, all the host groups which are present over here. Okay, fine. See the same stuff now. So command will be a raw utility which can do anything. Command will be called in a service, and in a service, what is the specialty? In a service, the command line arguments will be passed. So for example, we have seen the command called as check ping, and if you remember, check ping takes 2 arguments or 3 arguments, whatever it is. Is the service passing that? If you see 100.0, 0.2 percentage, 20%, there is, this is some way of passing arguments. Okay, how it is, that is tomorrow's class content. I'll tell you what those things mean in Nagios in tomorrow's class. But if you are saying the command and the arguments which are being combined, we call it as a service. Okay, and in the service you can configure host or host group name. All right, okay. Now the same thing goes with any other service which you see. So if you see, there is a pattern of things over here, yes or no? So first thing is, you'll have commands, and based out of the commands, okay, we will create first host and host groups, and now on which machine which rule has to be processed, we will first decide, and then we will be creating a service, and in that service we'll be using a command, and to that command we'll pass whatever are the arguments, and then we'll be calling a host name or a host group name from there, so that this check is enabled on all the machines or on the specific machine. That's it. Okay, so actually what I would do in the next class is I would configure some checks on the machines which I create in the tomorrow's class. That's what I would be doing, so that we'll come to know this configuration part, very important. But the essence of it, our configuration will not go anything beyond this. Okay, so apart from that, we will have one more thing, which is notifications. So how do you inform users? Okay, so we will be basically doing this plus notification in the tomorrow's class. So I'll be taking 2 servers, and I'll be configuring some what do you say, some checks on that, which is some services on that, and then I'll basically be seeing, we'll be seeing that on a web page how it looks like, and when that server is down, how will we get the mails? So this is what our intention of tomorrow's classes, right? And remember, in Nagios, you can send the notifications not only by mail, by a SMS and pager also, but for that you need to install plugins. Okay, and for pager you will have different command or a different service. That's the whole point. That's the whole point which we are looking out at. And what is this use? So we'll be looking into even this. Okay, so we'll be looking into all of these configuration files, but at a overall perspective, what is that we are trying to do? We are trying to add a host, we are trying to add host group, contact group, because you'll be seeing something called as contacts are also here, contacts.cfg. Okay, so and then we would be basically sending, whenever something goes wrong, we will configure that. Okay, we'll be writing a service. In the service, we'll be passing the command and the arguments to it, and then we will be saying on which you need to execute this service. Nothing beyond this. Nagios ఎంతకంటే గొప్పగా ఏమి ఉండదు. The only thing which you need to find, which is difficult, is if you want to develop something like check underscore ping, that's the utility, then it is difficult. Then it is difficult because you need to know some programming around it. But to use Nagios, not that difficult. Okay, if you know what is host, what is host group, what is command, what is service, okay, what is contact and what is contact group, using Nagios is not difficult. Yeah, but I do agree that creating the commands are difficult. Okay, creating the commands and మనం వాడే commands కాదు, check underscore ping exe in write, that is difficult, but that is not our job. Okay, in Nagios the best part is there are many third party or open source commands already available. You can just download them and start working with them. So that's not a very difficult cup of tea. So tomorrow what we will be looking at is, let us look at maintainability or reachability of some servers, and whenever that server goes down, it has to send a notification. That is what I'd be doing in the tomorrow's class. All right, fine. So please get an overview of this terminology. If you understand this terminology, very simple. If you don't, everything is confusing. Okay, so for the people who find Nagios 4 installation difficult, I have told you what has to be done also. So if you don't want to follow all of this, go to the Ubuntu 14 machine, install, do apt-get update, apt-get install Nagios 3 minus y, done. Okay, so that's one simple way of looking at it. Okay, Nagios 4 is the latest version. So if you want to follow Nagios 4, you have to go with the DigitalOcean's documentation, right? Okay, now let me look at questions. Can we install Nagios? You can install Nagios on Linux machine. Okay, if your Linux machine is anywhere, it doesn't matter. So whether it is in Vagrant, whether it is in AWS, it doesn't matter. All right, yeah. Okay, and one thing to remember is, what is the basic checking of Nagios? Active. So whenever you want Nagios to monitor any other server, that should be reachable from Nagios. That is the only ground rule kada. Active check and Nagios server should be able to speak with the other machine. Okay, so ensure that Nagios monitoring is, our server is placed in a network which can ping your other servers. Don't put it in a network where it is not pingable to other servers. Then you have to unfortunately write passive checks, which are very difficult, where you need external applications. So try to be, even in reality, we will try to be as much active as possible. Only in the case of corner scenarios, we go with passive checks. Passive undi kada ani anni passive cheste Nagios performance is not good. So if you want passive checks, better go with metric beat. Metric beat is much performant in Elastic Stack than passive checks of Nagios. Right? Okay. So that's what I had. Any questions in the room? What is client and what is source server here? Mm. 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 If it is active, what is the direction? Active check direction ఏమని చెప్పాను నేను? క్లయింట్ సర్వర్ తో మాట్లాడుతున్నా, సర్వర్ క్లయింట్ తో మాట్లాడుతున్నా. So there is no need of client being communicated to the server at all. In the case of passive checks, you need that, but for that you need external application, if you remember. So that is your responsibility to build that external application which sends the details. There are agents, NRPE agents, which you need to install on your machine. That is an external application which can send you the data on your machines, right? So try to be as much active as possible so that you don't need to deviate. But if you use the other stuff, then the complication of Nagios starts at. That's where Isinga has came in place. For this passive checks, the Nagios architecture is quite tricky. All right. So basically, whenever you are interacting from client to the server, you need external application. That is for sure. And that external application could be an existing agent or something which your developers have developed or you have developed. Right. Try to be as much active as possible if you are using Nagios. Don't even think of passive in your architecture. Okay, even if asked in interviews, I know what a passive is, don't tell that you have done passive, because passive is quite a complicated and error prone area in Nagios. The whole reason for the birth of the tool called as Isinga, which I have said that they have used the same code base, is to basically reduce complications on that front. Isinga complication. If you add something new to Nagios, the architecture is quite tricky. It doesn't support REST APIs. It doesn't support many other things. So Isinga is really working on all of that. Right. Okay. Will installation part be asked in interviews? If he's asking, definitely he doesn't know DevOps. He might. I don't know whether he could ask, but to any good knowledge, any organization, you might go and install Terraform, you might go and install Packer, but if you are installing Nagios on that machine, on your company, that means that they have never done anything. Because if not Nagios, they will have some sort of monitoring tool already. All right. So generally, 90% of the cases, you will not be given a chance to install Nagios. All right. We install Nagios because we need to practice something. That's it. Okay. In your organization, you don't do that. And Nagios is a very well-known tool to your IT admins. So if you say Nagios, they would say that they would readily make it available with all the Active Directory configurations and all of that stuff that is necessary. Okay. So NRP is an agent. It is an external installation. Okay, which is basically used for reading values from passive checks. So that's where it comes into. Any other stuff? మీ జీతం మీకే ఇస్తున్నారా ఇంకెవరికైనా ఇస్తున్నారా? Once we are DevOps, it is our responsibility for all of our servers, not Exchange servers. So in DevOps, we have our own smaller version of Nagios, so that we monitor whatever servers which we are using for our delivery pipeline automation. అంటే మనం దాన్ని ఫిక్స్ చేయకపోవచ్చు. For example, let us assume that you have a Jenkins build server. Your organization is used. You might have your own Nagios server, which will tell you that Jenkins server is died. The only thing, the response of that is you might raise a IT ticket if your organization is very much organized. But if your organization is not that, you might also need to find out why that machine is died, and then probably you might need to create one more. If you are on non-cloud environments, if you are on cloud environments, we basically, whenever it kills, we generally configure for all the high availability scenarios for all the important servers. So it doesn't matter. We have to ensure that the machine is up even after some time. So దీనికి చాలా ifs and buts ఉన్నాయి. It's not a one straightforward answer that we will be doing it or IT will be doing it. No, it depends on your company, it depends on your scenario, it depends on many other things. But DevOps team will have their own monitoring services for the servers which they require for their day-to-day work. Okay, what has to be done when they are not working is your organizational pipeline. In some organizations, you are responsible for making it up again. In some organizations, you are not. That's it. Okay. What do you mean? You have, so you want to find out web server for 200. For that, you have to find the command for that. If you have a command, simple logic in the command which will give you whether it is 200, then the check is true or false, whatever it is. So you have to check in that way. So there are some commands already available for that. HTTP status codes. There is something called as check_HTTP command. Just look into that areas. Yeah. Resource utilization. It depends on command. It has nothing to do. The whole point is command. Even it is the disk utilization is also a command for it. Command work aithe work avudandi. Yes, you can enable them. You can enable verbose or whatever kinds of logs which you want. That is all in Nagios configuration file. Yeah, nagios.cfg, the first file which I have opened, it consists of everything. Where do you want to store the logs of Nagios? You can do that. అలా ఉండదండి. అంటే ఇప్పుడు నేను ఏం మానిటర్ చేస్తున్నాను అన్నది నా ఆర్కిటెక్చర్ కదా. ఇప్పుడు నేను ఎస్ ఆర్ నో అని అనలేను దానికి. ద ప్రాబ్లమ్ విత్ దీస్ కైండ్ ఆఫ్ సొల్యూషన్స్ ఇస్ ఐ కాంట్ సే liberately yes or no. Okay, it depends on what is that I am monitoring. See, if I am monitoring the production servers, the dynamics of what I am doing is very much different than what if I am doing it on dev or test servers. So it depends on your work. So I can't say yes or no there. Yeah, fine then. So let me stop it over here, and we'll be starting 15 minutes. We'll be starting the cloud, and we need to start on ARMs, right? Yeah, fine. Okay then, we'll meet tomorrow.